What's up, everybody? Happy Columbus Day. Today is the day where the confirmation hearings for Amy Coney Barrett begins, and is also a day where I happened to catch some of Joe Biden actually out and about and giving a talk in Toledo. So I shall go through and see where and talk about a few of those things here. I'm not going to go into the whole, it's like 5-something hours of confirmation hearings. I'm just going to go into a little bit of it and just to illustrate how to hear what's actually being said with a critical thinking mind. So I'm going to skip straight to Senator Feinstein's opening remarks in the Amy Coney Barrett hearings. I'm going to skip Lindsey Graham because he didn't say anything particularly controversial, insightful, anything like that. But let's hear Feinstein and hear what she says.
And your family. Less than 1 month ago, the nation lost one of our leading voices for equality. Ruth Bader Ginsburg left very big shoes to fill. Judge Ginsburg loved the law, and she loved this country. She worked all of her life to ensure that the opening words of our Constitution, "We the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union," included all the people, not just a few, elite few. She was a standard bearer for justice. Justice Ginsburg's nomination was the first one that I participated in when I came to the Senate, and it was a real thrill to be part of that crowded and celebratory hearing for someone who had broken down barriers and reopened doors and staunchly believed in a woman's right to full equality and autonomy. In filling Judge Ginsburg's seat, the stakes are...
Shit. I hit the wrong button here. I'm sorry, guys. So let me just stop right there. So in filling Ginsburg's seat, it's not her seat. It's not how it works. It's not her seat. It is the Supreme Court seat, and now we're filling it. It's not Ginsburg's seat, but it's a little linguistic trick to make you somehow think that it has anything to do with Ginsburg. It doesn't. I mean, obviously, she was the one that held that seat until now, but it is not her, and her replacement doesn't need to have anything to do with her.
Extraordinarily high for the American people, both in the short term and for decades to come. Most importantly, health care coverage for millions of Americans is at stake with this nomination.
Healthcare coverage is at stake with this nomination. So you can see this is what they're going to make this about. I'll get into that more in a bit.
So over the course of these hearings, my colleagues and I will focus on that subject.
Someone's opening a soda pop in the background.
We'll examine the consequences if, and that's a big if, Republicans succeed in rushing this nomination through the Senate before.
So what's she saying there? She says if, and that's a big if, Republicans succeed in rushing this nomination through. As far as I know, they have the votes, right? So unless something dramatic happens, she's going to be confirmed. So what is Feinstein implying here by saying it's a big if? Also, note the use of the word rushing through. They're not rushing it through. And Graham actually in the opening remarks said as much. He's like, dude, everybody on the right is saying just ram it through. Like, we could just have the vote and like do a no hearing or short hearing. I don't know what the rules are exactly. But the Republicans are deliberately offering a full hearing because, as he said, he wants the American people to hear and get to know Amy Coney Barrett, even though they do have the vote. So they don't need the hearing in order to get the votes. So what is going on here with that statement? That's very interesting, and we'll see in the coming days what that implies.
The next president takes office. But most importantly, in just a few weeks, on November 10th, the Supreme Court will hear hearings in Texas v. California, a case brought to strike down the ACA. The president has promised to appoint justices who will vote to dismantle that law. As a candidate, he criticized the Supreme Court for upholding the law and said, and I quote, "If I win the presidency, my judicial appointments will do the right thing, unlike Bush's appointee, John Roberts, on Obamacare," end quote.
So just so everyone's clear here, the purpose of the Supreme Court is not to make policy. Right? The purpose of the Supreme Court is to determine whether or not something is constitutional. And there are lots of good reasons to think that there are tenets in the Affordable Care Act that are not constitutional, specifically the individual mandate. And I don't know enough about the details of this stuff, but the point is that Trump and others would claim that it's not constitutional and that ruling was false, and they get into that later. But that's what's at stake here, right? It's not like, hey, we want to strike this law down. Well, I guess there are people who want to do that, right? But the question is whether it is constitutional or not. Let's see here.
When he appointed Judge Barrett to fill Justice Ginsburg's seat, the president
again, it's not Justice Ginsburg's seat; it's the Supreme Court seat.
Said that eliminating the Affordable Care Act would be, quote, "a big win for the USA."
And the reason that the president says that, let's just be clear, right, is he says it's a deeply ineffective, inefficient piece of legislation, and it's very, very costly, and we can do better. We can do something that's better and cheaper for the American people while still protecting pre-existing conditions. That's the point. That's the argument. Now, is he going to succeed with that? We don't know. That's not clear, but that is the stated goal here. It's not to, have people not have health insurance. It's to have them have better health insurance. And I think we can all agree that, love it or hate it, the Affordable Care Act probably could be done better.
Judge Barrett, you've been critical of Chief Justice Roberts for his 5-4 opinion upholding the law, stating that Roberts, quote, "pushed the Affordable Care Act beyond its plausible meaning to save the statute," end quote.
And if that's the argument, so I'm not a lawyer, but that seems like a pretty reasonable argument to me, right? Like, hey, that was twisting the law or to reach a specific outcome, which is not warranted. So I've been reading up on the Supreme Court a little bit, and there are the originalists like Scalia, who says the Supreme Court's job is to rule based on the Constitution, and the Constitution and the amendments, that is all we have, and we have to look at what was the intended meaning at the time it was written, which is why he was a stickler for using the second edition of the Merriam-Webster dictionary to find out what the meaning of those words were at the time. Over time, the meaning of words shifts and morphs, and what matters is what did they mean at the time they were written. So if things change now and moral values and whatnot changes now, that's not the job of the judges of the Supreme Court to roll with that, because then it just becomes like whatever the hell the Supreme Courts of the day think should be the law of the land. And that is not the job of the Supreme Court. That's the job of the legislative branch of Congress. So if you want different laws, you go enact different laws, right? You don't go to the Supreme Court to have the Supreme Court make laws. That's the Scalia argument, which I'm partial to, because to me that is the only thing that is sustainable. There's a clear separation of powers there, and you know what you have to deal with. And what I'm hearing Amy Coney Barrett saying is that that's her view as well, and that Roberts was actually twisting the law in order to make his case. And obviously, Feinstein doesn't seem to be a legal scholar and doesn't seem to be really concerned about that.
This well could mean that if Judge Barrett is confirmed, Americans stand to lose the benefits that the ACA provides. So I hope you will claim.
So lose the benefit. I mean, if it's unconstitutional, it's unconstitutional, right? And then like if we want a healthcare law similar to it, we'll like have to enact that in a way that is constitutional. That's how the game works, right? It's not the Supreme Court's job to determine whether or not how to do healthcare, right? It's only their job to determine whether it's constitutional or not. And there's good arguments to say it's not.
Verify that in this hearing. First, more.
And I think my bigger point here is Dianne Feinstein knows this, and yet she keeps twisting words and using words in a way that makes it seem like, something, wrong is going on here when clearly it's not.
Than 130 million Americans with pre-existing conditions like cancer, asthma.
Is that number correct, by the way? 130 million Americans with pre-existing conditions? That's insane, guys. That's like how big is the population? That's more than a third of the population that has pre-existing conditions. How many are kids, and how many of those? I mean, come on, people. Wake the fuck up. Take responsibility for your health. You can't outsource your health to your doctor. It's not how that works. You can't outsource your health to the government. You have to take responsibility for your health first. That is how life works. You have to exercise. You have to eat right. You have to keep a positive mind. You have to not fall off of stairs and do stupid shit. Right? You are primarily responsible for your health. Right? Take your vitamins and supplements and all that stuff. That's your responsibility. That's a staggering number. And again, the point, Trump wants to make sure that pre-existing conditions are covered. He's made that very clear many, many times. You may say that he's lying. Sure, people can lie all the time. Dianne Feinstein could be lying about all kinds of things, right? But let's take him at his words that that's what he wants to do. Again, if it's unconstitutional, it's unconstitutional. All right, let's keep going.
Or even COVID-19 could be denied coverage or charged more to obtain health insurance. This includes more than 16.8 million Californians with pre-existing conditions. And we are just one state, but I think you should know how we feel. Secondly, some 12 million working Americans are covered through the ACA's Medicaid expansion. If the act is struck down, they lose their health care. Third, more than 2 million Americans.
If it's unconstitutional, it's unconstitutional, then we'll have to come up with something else for them, right? That's how the game works.
Americans under the age of 26 are covered by their parents' health insurance, and they could lose that coverage. Fourth, insurers could charge higher premiums for women simply because of their gender. And fifth, women could lose access to critical preventive services and maternity care, including cancer screenings and woman visits. Now, the bottom line is this. There have been 70 attempts to repeal the ACA, but clearly the effort...
It's a lot, 70 attempts, so someone must really hate it, or I don't know what the deal is with that, or it's really, really bad, or I don't know.
To dismantle the law continues, and they are asking the Supreme Court to strike down the Affordable Care Act.
They're asking the Supreme Court to revisit whether it's constitutional or not, right? And if it's not constitutional, well, then it should be repealed, and we'll have to make a new law that is constitutional. That is how it works.
This, I believe, will cause tremendous harm. Consider people like Christina Monroe Garcia.
And then she goes into this personal anecdote of a person who blah, 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 healthcare, this, that, and the other thing. That's not how you make policy, right? You don't make policy by anecdotes. Oh, poor this person. Now let's pretend like something is constitutional when it's not. No, let's enact really stupid, bad, inefficient laws because we feel bad for this one person that Senator Feinstein happens to know. It's not how it works. It's not how it's supposed to work. It's not relevant for policy. It's not relevant for how we do policy. I'm sorry. I feel for this person. It's not how it's done, right? And Feinstein knows it, obviously. But if you can convince someone, then I guess that's the game. Like emotionally, if you can speak to people's emotions, then some people might get swayed by this, even though it's ridiculous on its face. All right, let's see here.
Started to fail because of
I kind of don't want to hear this whole story.
2,500 could afford the Affordable Care Act. Within weeks, through the California, and let me quote, it was like mountain coverage.
I love the little cards behind her. I guess that one that's still sitting there is a picture of Ruth Bader Ginsburg eating a meal or something. I'm not sure what that is.
No questions asked about my month payments. I would have to offer me coverage. Understand what it was like about being affordable insurance, end quote. We can't afford to go back to those days when Americans could be denied coverage or charged exorbitant amounts. That's what's at stake for many of us, for America.
You know what? I think that's not a constitutional question as far as I know. Again, I'm not a legal scholar, right? Isn't that a policy question? And so that should be handled by Congress. What we want the laws to be, what can and cannot be offered in terms of health insurance. Like if health insurance is a private thing or private companies making an offer, like young people pay more in car insurance in Denmark anyway. Like, between 18 and 25, you pay more for your car insurance because young guys, especially men, drive more recklessly. That's just how it is. And then there's a premium to pay for that. And so if you're a young man that drives really nicely, you're paying a premium because there are other young men that drive recklessly, right? At least for a while. And that's kind of how that market works. And so we can choose to say, well, we want to make an exception to this in certain markets like healthcare, and these are the specific rules that we want to make exceptions by. But again, I think that should be a legislative process. I think that's at least a very fair assumption. All right, let's go.
This nomination. And that's why the questions we will ask and the views, hopefully, that you will share with us are so important. We are now just 22 days from the election, Mr. Chairman. Voting is underway in 40 states. Senate Republicans.
It's not really relevant how close we are to the election. Trump is still the president. The Senate is still in session. That's what matters. Everything else is just a distraction.
Are pressing forward, full speed ahead, to consolidate a court.
Not full speed ahead. They're actually taking the time to do a full-on hearing.
That will carry their policies forward with, I hope, some review for the will of the American people.
Well, the review from the American people happened when they elected Donald Trump and the current Senate. That's how the process works. And Dianne Feinstein knows this.
President Trump said last week that he had, quote, instructed my representatives to stop negotiation over a COVID-19 relief package until after the election, end quote, and to, quote, focus full-time on confirming Judge Barrett to the Supreme Court.
All right. So this is so disingenuous by Dianne Feinstein. She pulls two things together that aren't the same. So yes, he has instructed his team to halt the COVID relief bill. Why? Because the Democrat was being obstructionist about it, and they were insisting on putting all kinds of pork into the bill that didn't help the people that needed the money. It was going to be channeled through a bunch of different things. I don't know the details of that, but that is as I understand it, the reason why they halted that process. Trump would have passed it if they could pass the offer, like, hey, let's just pass the stuff that we all agree on, and the Democrats wouldn't have it. And so then he was like, okay, I'm just going to back off until after the election. Hopefully we'll have the House back or something, and then we can pass the relief bill that the people want and need because the Democrats obstructing. That is why he pulled it. But Feinstein here makes it seem like he pulled it because he wanted to focus. Because he couldn't walk and chew gum at the same time, because Trump couldn't manage to both confirm Amy Coney Barrett, which isn't Trump's job, that's the Senate's job, and negotiate the relief bill. I'm sure they could have figured that out these two things were not related. They were not related, and Dianne Feinstein is pretending like they were, and she knows better.
When Justice Scalia died in February of 2016, Senate Republicans refused to consider a replacement for his seat until after the election. At the time,
let me just say again, it wasn't Scalia's seat either, just to be fair to both sides here. And they had the Senate, so they could do that.
Senator McConnell said, the American people should have a voice in the selection of their next Supreme Court justice. When asked in October 2018 if Republicans intended to honor their own rule if an opening were to come up in 2020, Chairman Graham promised, quote, if an opening comes in the last year of President Trump's term and the primary process has started, we'll wait till after the next election. Republicans should honor this word.
So that, I believe that I don't know why it's refusing to focus this thing here. So as far as I understand, Lindsey Graham actually did say that, and I think that is a mistake, and he's taken it back, and he's like, yeah, actually, no, not so much anymore. I don't know what the hell. Focus on me, for fuck's sake. So, I don't know why he would have said that, or what, but again, there is no question whatsoever that they have, the Republicans have every right to do what they're doing. No question.
For their promise.
And McConnell, McConnell had the Senate and Obama had the White House, right? So different situation.
And let the American people be heard. Simply put, I believe we should not be moving forward on this nomination, not until the election has ended and the next president has taken office. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Look at the assumption there that the next president has taken office, meaning it won't be Trump, Biden. Because if it was after the election and Trump won, then I guess there wouldn't be any reason not to continue on as long as to wait for January, right? So anyway, again, I don't know why she's harping on about this for the cameras, obviously, not for any effective change, I think.
Thank you very much, Senator Feinstein. Senator Grass.
All right, and then Chuck Grassley goes on, and we'll skip that because that's super boring as well. And then I just wanted to say a little bit about Leahy.
Americans who depend upon its coverage and trying to get tested.
Okay.
In our system.
Nominations, 16.
Huh. Okay, I was looking at a different stream before that actually had Senator Leahy. Amy Coney Barrett confirmation hearing. Let's just see if I can find that. I think that was that ABC or what was that? I want to find a full one, right? See if this one on C-SPAN, if they have the video. Yeah, there we go. There is Senator Leahy. Am I going to go through his whole thing?
Thank you. And I assume you can hear me all right?
Yes, sir. And we see you. There you are. Thank you.
Thank you. As I listen to this, I think about the fact that I've served in the Senate for 46 years. During that time, we had 20 Supreme Court nominations, 16 confirmation hearings. And I can tell you right now, none looked anything like this. We're less than 2 weeks from Justice Ginsburg being laid to rest. Now, it's true that the responsibility of this committee to consider her replacement on the Supreme Court, but this isn't the way we should do it. We should not have had a nomination ceremony before Justice Ginsburg was even buried.
So he just goes on and on about what we should or shouldn't do. And I'm like, how is that relevant? Honestly, it's, again, every right to do what they're doing. And yeah, I mean, what are you hoping to achieve here?
While the nation was mourning her passing, we should not be holding a hearing just 16 days later when this committee has afforded itself 3 times as long to vet other modern nominees to our nation's highest court. We shouldn't be holding a hearing 3 weeks from a presidential election when millions of Americans have already voted. Not when doing so requires.
How is it relevant that millions of Americans have already voted? What relevancy does that have at all? I don't know.
There's literally half of the Senate goes back on their word. Think of that, my Republican colleagues. Literally half of the Senate had to break their word.
Half the Senate had to break their word? What is he talking about? I don't think it's half the Senate make a promise about this. I mean, supposedly Lindsey Graham did, or not supposedly, I'm pretty sure he did. But does that constitute half the Senate? What is he talking about?
Predicting every argument they made 4 years ago about the American people needing a voice during election year.
That was McConnell, and there were different parties that had the Senate and the White House.
We should not be holding this hearing when it's plainly unsafe to do so. 2 members of this committee just now.
It's plainly unsafe to do so. You're doing it virtually. What are you talking about? What's the problem?
Emerging from quarantine after testing positive for COVID. And when
I mean, like, in that case, we'll have to, like, you can't just stop everything in the country because COVID, right? I mean, I guess that's what he wants us to do, or like stop all the things that he doesn't like.
Members have declined to get tested, and the chairman has refused to implement a daily testing regime to keep members and staff and Judge Barrett and her family safe. And I might say we shouldn't be spending time on this when we're doing absolutely nothing to pass a much-needed COVID bill.
Yeah, so that we're back to that bull crap. Anyway, so you get the picture there. Like they're so full of lying and deceit there. And so the pattern here is that they're saying things that they know are untrue, or that they know are irrelevant, right? In order to sway you to they purposefully ignore what is relevant and what is not to make their case. That is my conclusion. And so the lesson for you and I is we need to be way smarter than that. We need to know what's relevant and what's not. We need to know that they're systematically trying to deceive us and manipulate us. And we have to know our own background, our own story. We have to do our own digging, because we can't trust them to lay out the case honestly, because that's not what they're trying to do. It's not how they operate. They're not going to try to lay it out honestly. They're going to try to lay it out in a way that is dishonest but appeals emotionally to you, right? And that's what you see. That's what you see. All right, let's have a little bit of a look at Joe Biden today from Toledo. He says some interesting things.
Hello, Toledo.
All right, I like that he takes his mask off this time to actually speak into the microphone. I'm not sure why he was wearing a mask up there, because there's no one around, but hey.
This feels like coming home.
Are there any people there? It doesn't sound like it.
I tell you what, my dad was an automobile man. I got through school, and we got through being able to eat after we lost a job up in Scranton, Pennsylvania. He had moved down to Delaware because it's selling General Motors products. And so I've known, and my state used to have the largest percentage of auto workers of any state in the nation, because we had a small population and the largest General Motors and the largest Chrysler plant outside of Michigan and Ohio. And I saw what happened when we got hit very hard. We've lost both those plants. Well, let me start off by saying, Mr. Mayor,
Sorry.
thanks for the passport into your city. And Marcy, you've been a friend a long time. Thank you for your introduction. You know, there's no more fierce defender. There's no more fierce defender. The people she grew up with than.
All right, let's go.
She's tough.
All right, come on.
She's honest. And Tony, I'm worried if I get elected the first 100 days. But all kidding aside, Tony, thank you for hosting us. Thanks for that introduction. Elected, jumping in and being part of helping us govern. You remind me of something my dad said. He said, Joey, a job's about a lot more than a paycheck. It's about your dignity. It's about your place in the community. It's about respect. It's about being able to say to your kid and look them in the eye and say everything's going to be okay and mean it. That's what job's about. A decent paying job like the UAW provides. This lesson I grew up with, surrounded by hardworking families in Scranton and then in Claymont, Delaware, where we had to move when Dad lost work. There was no work in Scranton. Just like here in Toledo. But the times are hard. Unemployment is way up due to the pandemic and the terrible way in which it's been handled. The economic outlook.
Yeah, jobs are down, right, because of lockdowns, which are mostly it's a state-by-state issue at this point, right? It's not, Trump hasn't locked any states down. I don't think he can do that. It's a state issue.
Remains uncertain. Across Ohio and the country, folks are worried about making the next mortgage payment or the rent payment, whether or not they can purchase their prescription drugs or be able to put food on the table, literally. Worried about whether their kids' school is open and be able to stay open. And if they're not open, how they can go to work if they have a job and still take care of their kids.
Again, schools are closed not for any particular good reason. At this point, they're closed because local governments choose to keep them closed.
They see the people at the very top doing better than they ever have, while they're left to wonder, who's looking out for me?
And so whose fault is that? Whose fault is that people at the top are doing better than ever before? Who are the big donors to the Democratic Party? Isn't that Amazon and Google and Apple and all of those? I think they're Twitter, all that. I think they're huge donors to the Democratic Party. So, and they're doing better than ever. And some of the hardest lockdown states are Democratic. Is there a connection there? Not sure. Might be.
That's Donald Trump's presidency. 215,000 dead because of COVID.
Let's just be clear, the 215,000 dead because of COVID, 94% of those CDC said were comorbidities. There are people who would have died of something within a short period of time regardless. It was just COVID that happened to knock them over. COVID is not very fatal disease. It is generally not. So that I would take that 15,000 people number with a huge grain of salt. But obviously, Biden and the media likes to, sort of upper bound that number as much as they can.
Experts say we're likely to lose another 200,000 people in the next few months unless we take some serious action.
Like what?
He doesn't know what he's doing. All because this president's only worried about one thing, the stock market.
That's such bullshit. That's such bullshit, right? He's been wages are up and unemployment way down during his presidency, right? When you have, so this is what was so interesting here is like the Democrat Party and those huge corporations that fund them, what do they like? They like open borders. Why? Because that is downward pressure on wages, right? You have a bunch of people coming in who are willing to work for less money, even ignoring minimum wage laws because it's off the books. Essentially, I mean, obviously, big corporations are not going to hire someone off the books, right? But that gives downward pressure. So shoring up immigration, illegal immigration, the border, that is good for working class Americans. Trump keeps touting that. The reason why Trump also touts the stock market is because a lot of the middle class Americans, lower middle class, have 401ks. It's their pension funds, right? So it's good for them. He's not like the Biden and his folks, they're the ones that cater to huge corporations. Like look who comes out to the Trump rallies. It's not the billionaires, it's regular folks that are super passionate about the president, right? So this is a blatant lie, and he knows it. He knows that it's a blatant lie.
He refused to follow the science. It's estimated that if we just wore these masks nationally, we'd save over 100,000 lives between.
So I mean, if you refuse to follow the science is also one of those lines that sound great, but what is he talking about? Like there is no recommendation from Fauci and Birx and others that Trump hasn't followed, right? The government can't mandate mask wearing, and the federal government can't do that. It's a state issue. And so, what is he supposed to do? My estimation is that this stuff would have been way better if the government had done nothing. Right? Just let people decide for themselves how they want to do it. Don't lock the economy down. Don't lock people down. The CDC came out recently and said lockdowns were a mistake. They've been pro-mask, con-mask. They've changed their minds on masking so many times. Like science on this stuff is not clear, and it's. I mean, and even if you're just talking about like straight epidemiology, the trade-offs of whether to lock down or not, like that has dramatic consequences too, right? Like suicide rates are up, overdoses are up. Like, like what happens to people's physical and mental health when you lock down? Their economy is a real thing when people can't afford it. It's just because of the lockdown. So, I mean, dude, this is just so deceitful and dishonest from Joe Biden right here.
Now, in the end of the year,
But he's speaking to a picture that's been carefully painted by the mainstream media of Trump as this incompetent fool that speaks weird and doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about, right? And he does speak weird. Does speak super weird, and he's not, this intellectual bookworm guy. He's not. But he's got pretty good gut instincts. And so if you want to understand Trump, you have to hear with a certain filter and hear at the underlying thing that he's getting at. But yeah, this is
for 100,000 lives between now and the end of the year.
And so, they've estimated so many things. What can we believe at this point, right? And you know that, Biden. You know that. And yet you keep spouting this bullshit.
This president knew back in January. He was briefed in detail by the intelligence community how extreme.
Don't the senators get the same intelligence briefing? You knew too. Everybody knew, right?
Dangerous this COVID.
And also, nobody knew. They said something in a briefing, right? But nobody knew anything for sure. Maybe one thing that was said in one meeting in January ended up being correct months later, but nobody knew for sure that it was going to be correct back then. Be real here, people.
What virus was, how communicable the disease was. He went in a taped interview with Bob Woodward, a leading journalist. It's on.
So if that Bob Woodward thing, right? If that admission by Trump was as damning, and Bob Woodward was so concerned about it, why didn't Bob Woodward speak up back then and say, "Hey guys, the president's lying. He told me that this is really bad," and now he's like, no. Even Bob Woodward didn't really believe it at that point. Yes, that was the official message, the briefing, but we didn't know for sure, right? Just because someone says something and they kind of believe it's true doesn't mean that it's this thing that we know for sure, right? And so if you go out and you say something that's 40% likely to be true and it turns out to be false, that's a huge problem too, right? So that is such a crock.
Been played, telling Woodward that he knew how dangerous the disease was, but did nothing. Ask yourself, why didn't he tell us? Why didn't he warn us?
Because it wasn't there, it wasn't certain.
He said nothing.
And also, he didn't say nothing, right? He came out, he talked about it. Everybody was talking about it.
He told Woodward that he didn't want to panic the American people. That's why he said nothing. We don't panic. America doesn't panic.
What are you talking about? Of course America panics. Like, look at all the people who are wearing masks right now. What was I think I had it over here. See if I can find it. This one, let me just pull that up over here. Worried about getting the coronavirus, 77% Democratic men, 80% Democratic women, 20% Republican men, 29% Republican women. Like, that feels like panic to me. It kind of feels close to panic, honestly. Concerned. All these people that you see wearing masks inside of their cars, or like a couple walking in nature together still wearing masks. Yeah, Americans panic. Americans panic when you give them panic porn, they panic.
But Trump panicked. His reckless personal conduct since his diagnosis has been unconscionable.
No, he didn't panic.
The longer Donald Trump is president, the more reckless he seems to get.
I mean, what the hell are you talking about? Like, this is just, again, playing into, oh yeah, like narrative. He gets more and more reckless, right? There's no basis in fact. What are you talking about here?
Dr. Fauci, the most respected doc on this issue in the world, in the country.
Dr. Fauci said some pretty fucked up things, and he has contradicted himself many times. Let's just be real about this shit.
He told the president, the president's announcement of his pick for the Supreme Court in the Rose Garden, he referred to that as a super spreader. All those people that got the disease. How's he responding? Well, guess what?
I mean, it's outdoors. People make their own choices. Was that where they got it? We don't know, right?
He's now running an ad you probably saw, a national ad quoting Dr. Fauci out of context. Way back in March, referring to public health officials, Dr. Fauci said, "I can't imagine that anybody could be doing more," end of quote. In the recent ads that's going out nationally, Trump ad quotes Dr. Fauci saying that about him, the president. Trump and his campaign deliberately lied, making it sound like Fauci was talking about Trump. Fauci went on the public air, and the ad came out saying 3 days ago, "I did not give permission for that quote." He wasn't referring to the president. And even after that,
so I don't know the details of that.
Fauci said he didn't say that. The president and the campaign, even after Fauci laid this out, the campaign said, "We're still going to use it," because he did.
Wasn't Biden the one that said he wasn't going to run any negative ads while the president was in the hospital with a COVID diagnosis, and yet he still did that? All right.
Say it, even though it wasn't about him. The point I'm trying to make is, it was a knowing lie, like we're being told about everything about this COVID consequences. As a consequence to his months of overwhelming lying, misleading, and irresponsible action on the part of Donald Trump, how many empty chairs were around your breakfast table this morning?
0. Oh, the answer is 0. So, he keeps trotting out these very emotional appeals, right? Like, what would you have done differently exactly? What would you have done differently, and why? And how would that have made things better? It wouldn't, right? And so if you could imagine that this was a ploy by the Chinese Communist Party and by Democrats to try to harm the president, by harming the country, by harming the economy, in order to make the case that he bungled something when, like, he didn't. Like, every single state got everything that they asked for, ventilators or PPE or whatever, anything they asked for, they got, right? Like, he was following all of the recommendations from his doctors. And like, he shut down travel from China very, very early, which nobody else was on board with doing, which supposedly saved a ton of lives. So, what exactly, specifically, would you have done when? And what is the evidence that would have made a difference? And what is the public statements that you have to back up that you would have done it by then, right? Give us some specifics or shut the fuck up, right? That is how that's going to have to go. All right, guys. I'm gonna sign off for tonight. This is enough. This is fun. Have a good night. So the just to sum up again, think critically about everything that's being said here. Do not buy into emotional arguments. Keep asking, is this even relevant? Right? What evidence do you have? Like, what is the meaning of this? What is the implication of this? Like, is it true what you're saying? There are so many hoaxes during the debates that it's just insane. The whole Charlottesville thing, fine people on both sides, that's a hoax. He was not talking about white supremacists or white nationalists. I heard people say that after the debates that Trump still didn't denounce white supremacists. I'm like, what are you talking about? He's denounced white supremacists a million fucking times. Like, not a million literally, but over and over and over again, right? What about Antifa? What about Black Lives Matters? What about the riots and the looting? Has Biden been asked about denouncing those? Like, you know, what, like who all the black people and all the people in general that have been hurt and killed during these riots, who's taking responsibility for that? Who's asking Biden about those? The whole thing is pretty mad. And if you just buy into the narrative, you don't know what's going on. You don't know what's going on. You have to hear the other arguments that are out there, and then you have to make up an informed opinion and beware of the confirmation bias that happens thanks to the way that this president has been presented in the media over and over and over again. Right? If you haven't taken the time to understand how he works and listened to his full talks and understood the relationship that exists between Trump and his base and why they love him so much and he loves them, then you don't know anything. Then you've not done your duty as a citizen, right? There is a reason why people love this president. Like, people turn out in the thousands for his events. They're not racist. They're not evil. They're not stupid or uninformed. They're quite the opposite of that. Like, if you don't genuinely understand why that is, then you don't know anything. Then you haven't done your job as a citizen. And I'm not sure you should be qualified to vote, to be honest. I think that's you know, democracy works with an enlightened population, and if you're not willing to do the work that's required to be enlightened about what's going on, then we can't have a democracy. It's not going to work. All right, guys, that's it for today. Be strong, freedom fighters. Love you. See you. Bye.